Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. We got another round of class changes. The main focus of this is Mythic Plus, but there are some PvP changes included along with these that you definitely want to know about as a PvP player. These are some pretty big nerfs. They really targeted the quote-unquote god comp of Mythic Plus and went after the throat with these. And if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with changes related to World of Warcraft, as well as PvP and entertaining videos, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. I am working towards my long-term goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers, and your support is greatly appreciated. But let's get started here. We should note that some of the language has changed in this, except where noted, all changes will be offset so they do not apply to PvP. So if it doesn't say anything to do with PvP, it's not happening in PvP. That's the way you need to read these notes. It's almost backwards compared to how they usually do it, so it might get a bit confusing. So for Death Knights, Epidemic damage is being increased by 8%. Bursting Swords damage is being increased by 12%. This is only in PvE. It's not going to be happening in PvP. For Guardian Druid, Thrash damage is being reduced by 8%, and it will also be reduced in PvP. And Raise damage will be reduced by 8% and will also be reduced in PvP. So I don't know if Guardian Druids are being represented in maybe rated battlegrounds too much to why they got specifically some PvP changes, or maybe it's world PvP. But this is now how the language seems to be sorted for this update. For Augmentation Evokers, we're going to be seeing nerfs to Breath of the Eons. It's only going to accumulate 10% of the damage done by allies with your Ebb and Might down from 15. This is not applying in PvP. I'm honestly surprised to not see these changes for PvP, considering Augmentation is really still kind of dig pretty deep when it comes to PvP, so I was really expecting to see some. Fate Mirror's chance to proc has been reduced to 10%, down from 15. For Marksmanship Hunter, multi-shot damage is being increased by 8%, explosive shot damage is being increased by 10%, and trick shots damage increases the damage of your next aim shot or rapid fire by 70%, up from 65. Now, I've been playing my Marksmanship Hunter, and I got pretty excited reading this, but this means that it's not in PvP, because it doesn't say anything to do with PvP next to it, so don't worry, hunters aren't going to be jumping off the page. It's more so the classes that are less represented in PvP, I think, that are getting buffs on this round of changes. For Fire Mage, in PvE only, Flame Strike damage is being decreased by 10%, Flame Patch 10%, Conflagration 10%, Meteor damage 10%, Phoenix Flames 10%, and Living Bomb by 10%. So really targeting down their AoE and trying to rein that in, as that's one of the main driving factors to bring a class into Mythic Plus. For Frost Mage, Comet Storm is seeing a 6% damage nerf, Blizzard is seeing an 8% damage nerf, and Frozen Orb is seeing an 8% damage nerf, again targeting AoE spells for Frost Mage. These will not apply in PvP. Holy Paladin was another round of class changes that I was expecting to see for some in PvP, and honestly surprised that there aren't. All of their healing has been reduced by 5%. Light's protection is now reducing damage taken by 10%, down from 16. Overflowing Light now creates an absorb shield for 30% of the glimmers, overhealing down from 50. You can see these are massive, like ripping the floor out nerfs for Holy Paladin when it comes to Mythic Plus. Tears Deliverance now increases healing taken from Holy Light, Flash of Light, and Holy Shock by 15%, down from 25%. Blessing of Summer now causes attacks to deal 20% additional holy damage, down from 30. Fading Light now creates an absorb shield for 3% of the healing or damage done from holy power generators was 10%. And Righteous Judgment now has a 30% chance to activate Consecration, down from 50. This change will also affect PvP combat. Interesting. So Righteous Judgment now has a 30% chance to activate Consecration, down from 50. I'm not 100% certain on what this is, because activating Consecration, I would assume, is putting Consecration on the ground. But maybe it's something else. Holy Paladins, you're going to have to let me know. Consecration damage has been reduced by 25%, and this change will also affect PvP. So they're targeting a spell that I wasn't even aware people were using. Are people using this in like rated battlegrounds or something? To try and get Consecration damage going or something as a Holy Paladin? Because this is very strange to see this. Like, these are the changes included for PvP. I was expecting maybe something towards their throughput, their healing on Holy Shock, maybe an offset change to make their cast spells faster or something like that. But okay, Consecration is going to be getting nerfed in PvP. For Ret Paladin, Divine Storm is getting increased by 8%. Wake of Ashes is getting increased by 10%. Consecration is getting increased by 12%. These will not be in PvP. For Shadow Priests, I do like these changes they're doing for PvP. Vampiric Embrace is now only going to heal allies for 40% of the single target shadow spell damage dealt, down from 50. And Sand Lanes now reduces the cooldown of Vampiric Embrace by 30 seconds instead of 45. And this will also affect PvP combat. I think the amount of healing and support that Shadow is still giving to its team overall was remarkably high, so I think this is an appropriate nerf. For Discipline Priest is not performing as well as we'd like, so for this week we're increasing their atonement healing. In a future patch we are working on redesigning some of their talent options and making tuning adjustments there as well. Atonement healing is going to heal for 40% of the damage done, up from 36, and it will be also in PvP, so a 4% atonement buff for PvP. For Holy, Rhapsody now stacks every 1 second, down from 2, and causes Holy Nova to deal 20% increased damage per stack, up from 10. This change will also affect PvP combat. You're not going to press Holy Nova. Again, these are Mythic Plus changes, maybe to try and make these talents desirable in PvP, and like maybe you would in Rated Battleground press a Holy Nova. I don't know if your melee range is a Holy Priest, you're probably dead. Rhapsody now highlights Holy Nova while at 20 stacks. This change will also affect PvP combat. And like maybe it's worth trying. It's only a 10% buff to Holy Nova, but it might be worth trying this talent just to see if randomly it just one-taps somebody, because sometimes stuff like that happens. For Shadow, we're seeing Vampiric Touch damage reduced by 20%, Shadowy Pain damage reduced by 15%, and Shadowy Apparition damage reduced by 15%. Those are big, chunky nerfs. And healing from Vampiric Embrace is no longer reduced by 20% in PvP combat. So they nerfed it by 10, but then buffed it by 20. Is that right? They brought it down from 50 to 40%, but they removed a previous existing 20% reduction. So that's a 10% buff on Vampiric Embrace. Why? For PvP, why? Seems so unnecessary to increase their healing to their team. I don't know if that's an oversight. That seems really strange to me. I gotta tell you right now, that seems incredibly strange to be doing that, because their off healing is remarkable. Outlaw Rogue, you're finally getting a little bit of love here. 5% increase on all ability damage. It's also going to affect in PvP combat, and your auto attack damage is getting a 5% increase on top of this, which will also affect PvP combat. And Outlaw Rogue is one of those specs that's in a place where it definitely needs help on its damage. Again, 5% is really small, but maybe it's enough to try and give this spec a go, at least for a little bit. Warrior Ravage damage is going to be increased by 8%. Thunderous Roar damage is going to be increased by 8%, not in PvP. And for Fury, Improved Whirlwind is going to increase your next single target abilities by 55%, up from 50. So a little bit of an AoE buff towards Fury Warrior, trying to get them more competitive with the other classes in terms of their ability to do damage to trash. Honestly, was expecting a bit more changes here for PvP, specifically to some outliers. Like Holy Paladin, I think, is still going to be represented as one of the strongest spec. Augmentation Evoker is still kind of problematic in terms of its tankiness. Some of the hybrid utility and healing is still problematic, despite their approach to this patch and trying to reduce, passive healing through Vampiric Embrace, Nature's Vigil, and I'm spacing out of the name of it for Shaman, even though I've literally played thousands of games on Shaman now. Where you do damage and it heals, right? Passive healing, that's just providing a lot of value to the team. It's still kind of a big deal on a lot of those specs. So I'm a bit surprised to see that change for Vampiric Embrace. As far as Mythic Plus, I mean, they're targeting the top specs, lowering the AoE damage of them, and then buffing the AoE of the underrepresented specs. And that's the main driving factor of bringing a class. You either have mandatory utility or a mandatory buff that increases the damage of your group, or you do top AoE damage. I feel like there's not much nuance to it aside from that. Maybe you've got some type of skip or something you can do with the class's mechanics. Again, that's mandatory utility. So hopefully this is getting these classes, closer to where they're going to be. But my expectation for Mythic Plus meta is that it's going to still be pretty close. Maybe like you see one differentiating class every once in a while between a group, because the math isn't there 100% on trying to figure out if its AoE damage is better than the other class, or the familiarity of the player is determining that factor. So PvE tuning to me is a little bit more difficult to do in that sense, because the classes are either bringing a mandatory buff for value or they do the highest damage. Whereas in PvP, you've got crowd control, utility, defensives, and so many different avenues that can enable a class to be viable, even without just damage being the main contributing factor. So hopefully this does help in Mythic Plus in terms of creating variety, because obviously right now it's pretty stale with the variety for it. And with these changes coming through that we are seeing for PvP, something like Outlaw Rogue is getting a little bit of attention, hopefully gets more moving into the future. But other than that, thank you very much for tuning into the video. Hope that you enjoyed this update, and I will see you in the next one.